Welcome to another exploration of darkness, where we step into the mind and life of one of the most notorious figures in criminal history. Today, we're covering the case of Jeffrey Dahmer, a man whose brutal crimes shocked the world and left a lasting scar on the American consciousness. Dahmer's name is synonymous with horror, but his story is more than just a recounting of his crimes. It's an unsettling look at a broken mind and the monstrous path he chose. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. To most, he appeared to have a fairly normal childhood. His father, Lionel, was a chemist, and his mother, Joyce, struggled with mental health issues, often creating tension in the household. From a young age, Jeffrey was described as a quiet, shy boy who was isolated and often seemed detached from his surroundings. As he grew older, things took a darker turn. His family life deteriorated due to constant arguments between his parents, and he became increasingly withdrawn. But there were other signs that foreshadowed something far more disturbing. Jeffrey developed a fascination with dead animals and began dissecting them, something he initially tried to hide but later openly admitted to his father. Lionel, believing this interest was scientific, encouraged Jeffrey's curiosity. This fascination with death and dissection would later spiral into something horrific. By high school, Jeffrey was exhibiting more unusual behaviors. He began drinking heavily, even bringing alcohol to school. Teachers and classmates noticed his odd, sometimes erratic behavior. He was described as a loner who barely interacted with others. Dahmer later admitted that around this time, he began to fantasize about violence, control, and dominance. Fantasies that would eventually come to define his life. After high school, Jeffrey's life continued to unravel. He briefly attended Ohio State University, but soon dropped out due to poor grades and his increasing reliance on alcohol. His parents' divorce in 1978 only pushed him further down a dark path. Feeling abandoned and isolated, Dahmer acted on his fantasies for the first time that same year. At just 18, Dahmer committed his first murder. His victim was Stephen Hicks, a young man he picked up while driving. Dahmer lured Hicks to his family home, where the two drank and talked. But when Hicks tried to leave, Dahmer struck him with a barbell and strangled him to death. After killing him, Dahmer dismembered the body and, in a chilling move, scattered the remains around his family's property. He later admitted that this murder gave him a sense of control and fulfillment, a feeling he would seek to recreate over the next 13 years. After the murder of Stephen Hicks, Dahmer tried to suppress his urges. He joined the military in 1979 and was stationed in Germany, but his drinking habits continued, eventually leading to his discharge. He returned to the US and moved to Milwaukee, trying to live a normal life. However, his urges only grew stronger. Throughout the 1980s, Dahmer committed a series of murders. His victims were often young men whom he met in bars or on the street. He would lure them back to his apartment under the guise of friendship or for photographs, only to kill them, dismember their bodies, and sometimes engage in disturbing acts with their remains. Dahmer's methods became more elaborate, and his obsession with control and dominance over his victims became all-consuming. By the late 1980s, Jeffrey Dahmer had moved into apartment 213 in Milwaukee. This small, ordinary apartment would become the center of some of the most horrifying crimes in American history. Inside, Dahmer conducted experiments, attempting to create zombie-like victims by injecting chemicals into their brains in a twisted attempt to make them fully submissive. Apartment 213 became a chamber of horrors. Neighbors often complained of foul odors and strange sounds, but police didn't intervene. Inside, Dahmer kept body parts in his refrigerator and freezer, and even displayed a human skull as a twisted trophy. His obsession with possession and dominance over his victims went so far that he even practiced cannibalism, as he felt it brought his victims closer to him, a literal and disturbing manifestation of his need to control and consume. During his years of crime, there were moments when Jeffrey Dahmer could have been stopped. In May 1991, one of Dahmer's victims, Konorak Syntha Somphone, managed to escape. The young boy was found wandering the streets, visibly injured and disoriented. Two women called the police and reported that something was wrong. But when the officers arrived, Dahmer managed to convince them that Konarak was his boyfriend, that they were simply having a misunderstanding. Tragically, the police believed him and allowed Dahmer to take Konarak back to his apartment, where he was later killed. This moment was a missed opportunity that could have saved lives. This failure to act, combined with societal biases, allowed Dahmer's killing spree to continue, ultimately leading to more deaths. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer's reign of terror finally ended. That night, Dahmer lured Tracy Edwards to his apartment. But unlike Dahmer's other victims, Edwards managed to escape. He ran out of the apartment and flagged down two police officers, leading them back to Dahmer's residence. In 1992, Dahmer went to trial. His crimes were so disturbing that the case drew international attention. Dahmer pled guilty by reason of insanity, but after testimony from both the defense and the prosecution, he was declared sane and fully responsible for his actions. The trial painted a portrait of a deeply disturbed man who took pleasure in manipulating, torturing, and killing his victims. Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms in prison, a total of 957 years. His own defense team described him as a human monster, while Dahmer himself expressed a desire for death, saying he felt nothing but remorse for what he'd done. Jeffrey Dahmer served his sentence at the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage, Wisconsin. In prison, he was reportedly a target for other inmates, many of whom knew about his heinous crimes. Despite his notoriety, Dahmer seemed resigned to his fate and even welcomed the possibility of death. On November 28, 1994, Dahmer was attacked and killed by a fellow inmate, Christopher Scarver. Some saw this as poetic justice, the ultimate end for a man who had caused so much pain. But his death didn't bring closure. The families of his victims were left to grapple with an overwhelming sense of loss and grief. The story of Jeffrey Dahmer is a chilling reminder of humanity's darkest depths. His life and crimes force us to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil can sometimes be hidden in plain sight. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of history's most disturbing cases. Until next time, remember that the monsters among us may not always appear as monsters, but their darkness lingers in ways we may never fully understand.